about what we're all kind of going through right now with this whole quarantine thing. And I know it's starting to be kind of relaxed a little bit, but there's still a lot of fear and uncertainty about what's going to happen. And so I asked on Instagram for you guys to give me some feedback about what you wanted to see us talk about. So one of the things was about how do you have faith in times of uncertainty? And I think one of the things that we need to do is sort of learn to name what it is that's causing us the issues, what it is that's bringing us anxiety, what it is that's sort of affecting us. So this exercise we're going to do quickly today, or I say quickly, the part I'm going to lead you in is quick. I want you to spend a little bit of time with it though, if you can, is actually based out of Exodus. So if you have a scripture with you, if you can grab it, it is Exodus 4, 1 through 5. So it's only 5 verses today that we want to talk about when we talk about how it is to sort of deal with our current circumstances and how we can sort of look through them. So we're in Exodus 4, 1 through 5. Moses answered, "What if they don't believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. Then the Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it, as you should do. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you." So these are the verses. Now, Moses, this part of this passage is when God is calling Moses to this new task that he's been given. And it's so big, it's so large, it almost seems impossible what God is asking him to do. He's supposed to lead a whole nation out of slavery against the most powerful ruler of the time, which was Pharaoh, and create a whole new nation. Now, I don't think I've ever been given a job that big, but I can certainly think of times where God calls me to do something that seems really impossible to me at the time. And Moses doesn't seem like the ideal candidate. His family situation was weird. He was adopted by an Egyptian prince. He was a known murderer. He killed a guy. And he was a fugitive. He was on the run. If you want to see earlier in Exodus, all this is about his story. And Moses had probably one of the worst backgrounds you could think of. He was a fugitive, and God was asking him to go back to where he committed the crime. And he was not only that, but even worse, he was terrible at public speaking. So how's a person who's a murderer, a fugitive, terrible at talking to people, supposed to convince people to follow God out of this situation? But God still called him and said, "Go, like you need to go." Now, how does that apply today? Well, I think we're all being called to do some stuff that's probably difficult to us. Just number one, taking care of each other in this time of pandemic. I know we're all tired of being inside, but that's what we have to do to take care of each other. I know we're tired of having to have our life not be what it was, but it may not go back to normal for quite a while. So we're being called to do this kind of hard thing, to face this fear, to face this anxiety. And if this is something that you've felt, I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about that. What is it that you feel? How have you felt about that? And let's look at what God says about that feeling that we get, about that feeling of, I'm not capable of doing this. So what God says in the face of Moses' doubt, because he says, "What if they don't believe me?" And instead, God asks, "What's in your hand?" What a weird thing to ask, right? What is that in your hand? And he goes, "It's a stick." Duh, because I'm like a shepherd guy. I have this stick. And he tells him, "Throw it on the ground." Now, it turns into a snake, and Moses is scared. And then God, the second command is, take the snake by the tail. Now, think about this. You're Moses. You spent 40 years as a shepherd. You know what it is to be outside. You know the adventure of being outside, and you know that snakes are dangerous. Especially if you grab a snake by the tail. That seems like the absolute dumbest thing that you could possibly do. Because you grab a snake by the tail, what happens? It gets around and it bites you. So, what would you be thinking if you were Moses about God's command here? Now, I think that what maybe the way we can relate this to us today is, what is it that we fear? What is it about this current situation that we actually fear? What is it that we're afraid to grab hold of? What is it that we're afraid to deal with? Is it bad memories of a painful time? Maybe we regret something we've done in the past that we feel still holding us back. Maybe it's just simple fear of the unknown. There's a lot of unknown right now, and it's very easy to be afraid of the unknown. It's a natural human response. So whatever it is to you, God is calling you to look down at your hand and see what it is that you're holding on to see what it is that you're afraid of. And maybe he wants you to throw that thing down, and it's time to let it go. So I think it's really important that we name that. There's a lot of ancient wisdom that when you name something, you reduce its power over you, and I think that's really true. It's kind of that whole adage, I think it was Churchill, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. If you can identify that what you're afraid of is being afraid, that's kind of the first step. Or if what you're afraid of is being rejected, what you're afraid of is people will find out about something I did, whatever it is you're afraid of, if you can name that and pray to God to help you let that go and put it on the ground. Now, this story is interesting in that when they put the thing down, that's not the end of this. When Moses puts the stick down, it's not the end of the story. It's not like that's done. Okay, cool. I put my fear down and it's done. In this case, it actually got worse. The snake turned into the stick turned into a snake. And that is even scarier. And Moses doesn't want to pick it back up. And I think the message here is that sometimes we think, well, I'm a Christian, God loves me. Once I've sort of made this one-time prayer about getting rid of my fear, then it's done. And sometimes that's not what happens. Sometimes it's not done. Sometimes we have to keep dealing with it. Sometimes it may even feel worse while we're trying to go through the process of letting it go. And God's asking us to reach down in faith and pick up that snake by the tail and to show that he is with us and that he asks us to do that faith. So what I want you to do and when Moses did that, he had to take that step. He reached down and picked up the snake. It turned back into the staff. So God took him through the letting go, the picking up of something worse, and ultimately showed him that what he thought was worse was just the same old thing. I think that's quite fertile ground for thought too. Maybe what we keep picking up is just the same old thing, and we've got to let go of it. And I will say this, none of this advice about trying to pray through this and what you should put down and how you should pick things up and how do you deal with fear and anxiety and all that is meant to tell you that it's not okay to have those feelings, because it certainly is. Moses had those feelings and God was with him. It's also not to tell you that if you really struggle with something that you can't work through, it's totally okay to see professional help. A couple times in my life, I have gone to therapists for a couple of years, and it was the best thing I could have ever possibly done. So if you're in a position where you feel like you need that, like, it's certainly okay to talk to your parents, talk to somebody you trust about how you can obtain that for yourself, because it's certainly needed. But I do think that even if you go to therapy, whatever you do, there is work that has to happen within us. There's work that has to happen within us to let go of that thing we're holding on to. Sometimes pick up something that feels worse and realize that God's with us as we work through letting go of it. So that's the short message for today. I pray that as you end this video that you will, take your journal, whatever it is, piece of paper, whatever you have to write with, and spend some time praying to God, what is it that I need to let go of to grow deeper in faith with you? What is the fear and anxiety I'm feeling? What can I actually name it so that I can learn to let go of it? And maybe God's calling you to grapple with something deeper, and he wants you to reach down and grab that snake, that you'll think about naming what that is too. What is it that I need to dig deeper into? What is it that I need to work on as a person in order to grow, in order to have faith? And realize throughout it all that God's with you. I think that's the most important piece of this. I know it sounds super simple, but it's important. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining, Aiden. Happy birthday to you, sir. Hope everybody else that watches this is doing super well. If you are around at 2:30, we have our Zoom game time at the normal Zoom room at 2:30. You can hop over there and play some games with us here in about 15 minutes. So just wanted to let you know that my phone is reminding me. So I'm going to get rid of that notification so I can focus. All right, so thank you all for being here. I just pray that you will have this opportunity to let God work with you and kind of take that first step to dealing with the fear and anxiety we deal with, is to name it and try to do what we can do, let go of it. So we'll talk about this some more next time. Thank you all for joining, and we love you. Can't wait to see you all in person again. We will see you later. Bye.